Let's talk a little bit about integration. There's been a lot of new information, changes during the last 5 days. Changes to diet, lifestyle, day-to-day activities, maybe to sadhana. Many changes. And many people are feeling positive effects from the changes. Feeling more peaceful, calmer mind, more balanced dosha, more energy. And they ask, how do I bring these changes into my life when I go back to my work and my family, day-to-day routines? So what's really being asked is, how do I integrate these changes into the totality of my life? So that's what we call integration. And to understand integration, it helps a little bit to understand the natural course of healing and the process of healing. So when there's an injury or an illness, the parts become separated from the whole. And that's why we said healing is a movement towards wholeness, a return to wholeness, a return to the original form of life. And so when we look at the human body, or let's say the human organism, which includes body, mind, and soul, we have tissues, dhatus, 7 major tissues, 7 major dhatus that make up then the organs that make up the physical substance of the body, what we call physical. Though in reality, there's more space than tissue. But for the sake of discussion, the physical aspect. Then there's a fluid aspect. Most of the space between the cells is what we call protoplasm or fluid. And even within the cells there's fluid. And within the human body it's 70 to 80% water. So it's more fluid than tissue. So we have a tissue, we have a fluid. And then we have something moving through both of these that we call prana, or life force, which has more of a electrical capacity or electrical component. So you could say you have a tissue, a fluid, and a potency, or you have a tissue and a fluid and a bioelectric field, or you have a mechanical energy, a biochemical energy, and a bioelectric energy. And these 3 functions are designed and organized to be one substance. And when they are one substance, they function well and appropriately. So everything's going along well, and we have one substance moving along, body, mind, spirit, as one substance. And then something happens. Maybe there's a fall, or an injury, or an illness, or a shock, or a trauma. Any number of things could happen. And we get what's called a lamination. So they laminate, they separate out. So now the prana is functioning in one capacity and it's not integrated so well with the tissue and the fluid. It's moving in one way and the tissue's moving in another way and the fluid's moving in another way. So these 3 aspects of life in the incarnate world are functioning off of different fulcrums and doing their own things when they should be one. Sometimes it's 2 together and 1 is separate. Sometimes they're all 3 separate. So body, mind, and soul aren't functioning as a single unit. It happens in PTSD. There's disassociation of the mind from the body and the soul. So the mind gets very overactive and starts thinking one thing and giving one message, and the body's trying to do something else, and the soul is doing something else. So the person seeks something to do about this, because this is suffering. This is disease. It's uncomfortable. It's uncomfortable if you have these separate parts that are made to be one doing all these different things. And we begin to develop symptoms. It could be a rash, it could be heartburn, it could be pain, it could be a broken bone. But pain is a communication from the prana that these parts are separated, even emotional pain. So the parts are separated somehow, and they want to be one. That's all they want. That's all they want. So they're trying to become one. And if there's no limitation, if there's no impingement, they will be, because there is a desire, there is a motion towards this oneness. But often there's something impeding it. So we seek out some help. And healing is made to be done together in a community, and we seek some help. And somebody says, well, I see that this is happening, and if we could just do this and get the nervous system a little bit more relaxed and remind the prana where its home base is and what its motion is and where home is, a motion starts. So a movement starts, a movement that was arrested, a movement that's natural, a movement that's supposed to happen, somehow got arrested, got slowed down, got impeded. And the impediment is removed, and the movement back to wholeness is recreated. So a natural movement is recreated, and that's the movement towards wholeness, the movement of healings, and we call that healing. And it has a pace and a tempo. Sometimes it's fast and sometimes it's slow, but the motion is there, and now it's there. And so integration then is to make sure that all the parts are moving together back to the wholeness. And it can only move at the rate of the slowest part. So the mind might already want to go there, but it has to go at the pace of the fluid, of the tissue, of the prana. It's got to go at the pace of the totality. So accept your pace. Accept the pace that's being given to you. So integration is bringing all the parts along in the journey back to wholeness. That's integration. So now we're bringing all the parts back into the life. The movement's coming with us back into the life. The knowledge, the information, the wisdom, all the things that you've experienced, learned, done, we're bringing it back into the life, back into the whole of our life, at the pace and the tempo that is appropriate for each individual. We each have our own pace. Oh, beautiful rain's coming. So one way to approach this is start three lists. There's sadhana, diet, and lifestyle. And under each of those three categories, you make an inventory of the things that you learned and the things that you want to change and bring into your life. So the things in the diet, the things you want to change there. The things that you experienced here that you felt were beneficial. Maybe it's less salt, maybe it's less sweet. There could be many things. There are probably more than one thing in diet. And then in lifestyle, many things were discussed. So you make a list of the things that you want to do under lifestyle. Maybe it's getting up earlier, or going to bed earlier, or abhyanga, or tongue scraping, or the different things that were learned and discussed. And then sadhana, your spiritual practice. In that area, what do you desire to see permanent change? Where do you desire to see permanent change? So now you've got 3 categories and a list of several things under each category. We're not going to try to change all of them at once. Of that list, decide what's most important to you and what's most difficult. What do you think will be most difficult and what do you think will be easiest? And we're going to start with 1 at a time out of each category. 1, not all of them. You've got your list, but we're going to pick 1. Now, how to pick which one? How to pick which item of the several that are under each category? If you have a pitta constitution, you might want to pick the most difficult one. And if you have a kapha constitution, you might want to pick the easiest one. And if you have a vata constitution, you might want to pick which you think will be the quickest one. Pick one. Some will advocate for the hardest, some will advocate for the easiest. If you pick the easiest, it'll go quicker. You build energy with each of the easiest till you get to the hardest. If you pick the hardest, once the hardest is gone, usually the easier ones are all gone. You pick, based on your constitution, based on your mind, how your mind works. You have to know yourself a little bit. So you pick one of each of those categories and you give 30 days, because we just discussed how it takes 30 days for the change to be integrated, especially with the diet. If you stick with that for 30 days, it will be changed. And then you go to the next one. And the next one. And before you know it, all of these changes will be integrated into the wholeness of your life. They'll be a natural part of your life. And you'll be integrating body, mind, and spirit. You'll be practicing yoga. Because yoga is integration, union of body and soul. We have to take the changes and bring them into our life at the pace and the tempo that's being given. And it's being given based on multiple factors. How busy is your life at home? How demanding is your work? How much time do you have? How much energy do you have? The status of your health. And there's so many subtle factors that we don't know that each change makes on the totality of your being. It's changing the physiology. A dietary change changes the physiology. If you decide you're going to eliminate coffee, that's a big one. Because the whole physiology around the cortisol levels, the adrenal cortex, the endorphins that are released in the brain, all of this has to get changed. And that takes at least 30 days for the hormones to change, the endorphins to change, the biochemistry to change. All of these things in the fluid that we're talking about are changing. This is all in the fluid, all of these biochemical changes. And the prana has to change. So it's used to being given one set of information and responding one way. Now it has to start to breathe in a different way. And the biochemistry has to change, which changes the neurotransmitters in the brain, so that you can now produce your own endorphins coming from the breath of life, not dependent upon the substances in the coffee. And that's just an example. It's not a critique on coffee. Okay, I'm not trying to make anyone feel guilty. If you like coffee and that's not on your list, that's fine. No problem. For some people, coffee might help them a lot. But if you find that coffee makes you a little bit more anxious and your mind a little more restless, and you want to be free of that, that's an example. And to be patient with the change. Don't try to make all the changes at once, because that's not in harmony with the flow of life. It's not how it's too fast. There's a pace, there's a rhythm, there's a tempo to life. And we want to be in sync with that. We want to be synchronized with that. By listening to nature, listening to the sunrise, listening to the sunset. You can put that under your sadhana changes. I want to listen a little more. I want to listen to sunrise. It's a beautiful sound. I want to listen to the sunset. And you start there so now that's part of your practice. For 30 days, you don't try to make other changes in that category. So I want to listen to sunrise, I want to reduce my salt, and I want to do tongue scraping. Tongue scraping is very therapeutic. It's cleansing for the mouth, and it stimulates all the organs. Because the pranic channels and the nerve channels from the different parts of the tongue give a message to the different organs. So the tip of the tongue, if stimulated, gives message to the thyroid. The middle of the tongue gives a message to the intestines. So you're actually massaging your internal organs when you tongue scrape. So you can tongue scrape 7 times, twice a day. So you can say, I want to make that's part of my daily practice is tongue scraping. Part of my diet change is less salt. And part of my spiritual practice is listening. That's an example. I'm not telling you what to do. You're in charge. You're in charge of your life. You're in charge of your spiritual practice. You get to decide. You're the executive. You're the CEO of your own kingdom. So you make the assessment and decide which is easiest, which is hardest, and then decide based on your constitution, am I going for the easiest or the hardest first? There's no right and wrong. It's an executive decision based on your life. You pick one at a time, 30 days next. That's integration. In harmony with life, yeah. So that's a few suggestions, because some people have been asking, how do we bring this into our life? And it's a good question. The question shows insight. The question shows insight that I've had a lot of change, and I recognize I'm in a special environment, and I want this change in my daily life. The question's insightful. So now we have to approach it with some intelligence. And the intelligence is in harmony with nature. That's where our intelligence comes from. And our intelligence is given to us. Yesterday, did everybody get the rose water eye drops? Okay. I recommend not to use them with contacts in. Has anyone had cataract surgery? You've had cataract surgery. Should be okay. Don't ever do ghee drops with cataract surgery. Okay. Sometimes there's Ayurvedic practices of nitra bhasti with ghee to the eyes, it'll make the lens opaque. Those are made with rose water and alum, A-L-U-M, alum. 8 little grains of alum in the organic, unprocessed rose water. Shake it up. The eyes are a pitta organ. Lots of pitta in the eyes because the eyes are involved in digesting all of the outside world. It's a transformational process when the prana brings all of this information and it's biochemically changed in the eyes, travels across the optic nerve. The optic nerve crosses right at the door of the cave of Brahman, and then goes back into the visual cortex in the back of the brain, and then is created an image that's delivered to the silent observer in the cave of Brahman for interpretation and response. So that this biochemical change is all pitta activity. It's a digestive process. So the eyes are very, very pitta, so the rose water is soothing to the pitta. The eyes are also very closely related to the nervous system. The eyes, the physical eyes, contain every layer of the brain. Every layer of the brain. It's fascinating. So embryologically, when we're growing, the eyes are sitting on the edges of the third ventricle, on the edges of the cave of Brahman. Right on the side of the cave of Brahman are the eyes. They're sitting there as an idea. And when it's time for them to grow, a space in the fluid opens and they move forward, out, and around. So they come off the cave of Brahman and they come forward. And along the way, they pick up every layer of the brain. And they carry that forward. So it's interesting that the rishis, saints, and sages have often said that the eyes are the window to the soul. It's interesting that they said that. And then we find scientifically, it carries every layer of the brain and has an intimate relationship with the side or the walls of the cave of Brahman, the third ventricle. So soothing the eyes with the rosewater drops is soothing to the nervous system and soothing to the pitta, calming to the whole system. A lot of people work on computers a lot, and we have screens, or there's screens everywhere nowadays. You can't even shop at the grocery store without looking at a screen or get on an airplane. So all this screen activity on the cell phone and the computer, it's a strain on the eyes. It's a strain on the eyes, and it's a strain on the nervous system. So that's why we gave out the rosewater drops for you to try, to soothe your eyes, to calm your nervous system. Your eyes will be shiny and bright and have clearer vision. And it's something you can incorporate into your daily routines. The little things add up to be big things. A little diet change, a little danacharya change, a little tongue scraping, a little eye care, a little oil. These little things make a potent medicine. One of my teachers in medicine said, the little things are the big things. The little things are the big things. And it's true. It took me a while to understand. We get a momentum. And then the big things start to become little things. Yeah. Okay? So once you spend a few minutes with normal conscious breath, and you feel the breath starting to move lower, now it's established in your physiology. And it'll stay that way until you get upset or agitated or anxious. Once the breath is free, once the breath is responding to the breath of life, it's doing what it's made to do. And you only have to go back to that if you find yourself getting upset, anxious, or that loss of sensation of wholeness, which is that agitation. So if you just take a moment and let your awareness rest in the fontanelle, and just let it rest there. There you go. So we let it rest. And from there we're watching the breath, calmly watching the breath. Each inhalation, exhalation. But we're not trying to control it, so we're doing what we said in that lecture, of just watching it and letting it move on its own, a normal conscious breath. Now, you don't have to hold your attention there. Let Krishna Prana, let the breath of life hold your attention there. Do you feel the difference when something's holding it for you? Okay, so Krishna Prana, the breath of life, wants to hold that for you. See, once the attention's there, the instructions weren't put the attention in the fontanelle and hold it. It was just bring your attention to the fontanelle. So you let your attention come to the fontanelle and then ask Krishna Prana to hold it for you. And then just calmly watch the breath and let it change. It'll stay there until you get upset, until you get distracted. Then you have to say another prayer. You try it for a little bit and we'll see if it works. Okay? Because if what I'm saying isn't true, it'll prove itself not to be. Because the proof is in your own experience. So if I'm wrong, it'll prove to be wrong. But I could be. I could be. So anything I say, you test it in your own body experience, your own, because this is your own scientific instrument of the most precise of any instruments. It'll take them another 1,000 years to develop a man-made scientific instrument that's as sensitive as this. Because the rishis from 4,000, 7,000, 8,000, 12,000 years ago discovered things that our current scientific age is only barely beginning to catch up to. How did they know that Rakta Dhatu was the second tissue to be formed in the embryo 8,000 years ago before there was, quote, a microscope, which has now been proven scientifically with a microscope that the red blood cell is the second cell line to appear in the embryo. Because this instrument is so sensitive and the precision of their insight was such. So anything I say, you test it in your own experience. I'm not the authority. Well, I could be, but I'm not. I'm not the authority. But it is true, if you attention to the fontanelle, then ask Krishna Prana, please hold it there for me so that I can do my work. And then you'll feel when it's slipping down, when the attention's moved down, when the prana, because it's prana, you'll feel it. Then you just say another prayer. You may have to check your breath again. But it'll stay there a long time until you get stressed or have a political argument. That'll let it get all fussed up. Have a political conversation, gone. You'll have to spend another hour in prayer. So then you say another prayer, and so now you bring your attention back to the fontanelle. You notice your breath, you watch your breath, and then you ask Krishna Prana to hold it there. The breath of life. The prana that's being given is special medicine for you. It's given to you. It's going to bring all of the dhatus, all of the prana, all of the doshas into perfect balance. You don't worry about that. The gift of the Master is in perfect balance for you. It's a transmission of divine grace. And it will only bring further balance because it's whole. It's wholeness. So in the breath of life, there is fire, there is water, there is air, there is ether, there is earth as one substance. And then what it brings to each person, it can bring it up, bring it down. We see it in the treatments all the time. One person gets fire, another person gets water, another person gets air, but it's the same original substance. But it's so intelligent because it made you. So it knows exactly what you need in exactly the right proportion, exactly the right potency. It never makes a mistake. It's the perfect physician. That's why we consult all the time to that physician. It knows the right time to give it. There's all these things you have to pay attention to if you're a doctor writing a prescription. You got to know the potency, the medicine, the dose, the time, how much, how long, how short, with food, without food, all these details. That's all handled in the breath of life. When it brings the medicine, scorpion medicine like that, perfect prescription every time. No worry. And the guru is the true physician. The perfect medicine every time. Unerring. In our lineage of osteopathic medicine, there was Dr. Sutherland who really brought forth many, many principles. And he said it's an unerring potency that never makes a mistake. He was talking about the breath of life. An unerring potency that never makes a mistake. So we rely on that in our treatments. So I go for consultation with every patient. I call for a consultation. Did you know that? Yeah. I dial long distance to the breath of life. It's not so long. It's right there. But we get a consultation every time. Because we're relying on that wisdom to come and bring the perfect prescription. That's why when Bani Ma puts her hands on you, she's listening for something coming through and trying to see, is this prana, tejas, ojas? Is this fire? Is this water? Is this heat? Do they need more heat? Do they need less heat? Perfect every time. I've never seen a mistake. Sometimes we think it's kind of slow, but that's not a mistake too. And sometimes it's like, wow, that was really fast, like the scorpion. Yeah. Beautiful question. Don't worry, you'll get the perfect medicine. It's coming into balance. Castor oil comes from the castor bean. Have you seen the castor bean? It looks kind of like a coffee bean. And it's secreted out a thick, oily substance. So it's thick. It's a thick and heavy oil. And it has anti-inflammatory properties to it. So it's actually a natural steroid. So sometimes we'll use a little castor oil mixed with a little coconut oil for rashes. Rashes that are hot and have an inflammatory component. We might mix some castor oil with some coconut oil and use it on that kind of rash. Generally not on the wet rashes so much, because rashes can be wet too. But on those dry or hotter rashes, it can be helpful. Castor oil has a natural anti-inflammatory effect on rheumatoid arthritis. So sometimes we will use a little castor oil in the ginger tea, but not too much castor oil because it'll cause a purge. So it's like 1/8 of a teaspoon in some warm, fresh ginger tea, and it soothes the inflammation in the rheumatoid arthritis. And it soothes the inflammation throughout, because rheumatoid arthritis is a systemic illness. It's an autoimmune process where the body's gotten confused and begins to think the synovial joint, the synovial tissue around the joint, is a foreign substance, and it starts to send antibodies and cells that begin to have an effect on that tissue. And the castor oil soothes that. Castor oil has a viscosity to it, a slipperiness, and a clarity. So it brings that clarity and that smoothness into the body that ingests it. So the prana gets a little smoother and a little clearer. And if you take high doses of castor oil, that viscosity goes to the intestines and you get a purge. And a lot of release can happen very quickly. So it's sometimes used in constipation, though more for emergencies in constipation, because it can create dependency. So we use it with caution for constipation. Triphala won't create dependency. And castor oil can create dependency if you use too much. So sometimes in cleansing and panchakarma, the day before the actual panchakarma starts, you take a large amount of castor oil and get a purge. Don't take it the day before going to the airport. Yeah. Sometimes if there's an inflamed joint, acutely inflamed, the castor oil can help a little bit. For more daily use, maybe Mahanarayan oil or a different oil, depending on your dosha, then castor oil every day on the joints. It's a heavy oil. So used too heavy, too much body surface too frequently can make the kapha dosha come out of balance. It's a powerful oil, so it's used more sparingly. It's powerful, it's good to use, but with caution. So the change isn't necessarily easy, but it has a sense of ease. And by ease, it means you have a sense of peace and well-being. Like, okay, this is really hard, but I know it's right, and it feels right even though it's hard. If you don't have that, then you're pushing against the tempo of nature. Because the tempo of nature, when you're with the tempo of nature, there's a certain ease because the prana is moving in that direction at that pace and that tempo, and the space is opening for it to move in. But it's tricky because it can be hard. You'd be like, I don't really want to, but I've still got it. It's so okay. I know it's going to be hard, but I'm a little bit excited to try it. Or I feel a little sense of joy to think about trying it. Or I feel my heart open just a little bit to think about trying it. If I don't have at least that, you're not in harmony with this timing of the nature yet. But it could come in another minute, or it could come this evening, or you could check in tomorrow and you think, yeah, I think I'm ready to just try that bitter 3 times a week. So sometimes it's just that we have the wrong prescription in our mind. So what you're doing is you're writing a prescription for yourself. Okay? If you think of it in terms of medicine, I'm going to prescribe a little bitter, okay, but I'm not sure how much, okay, so every day I'm not feeling so excited about that, okay, but I think I could handle once a week. Yeah, that brings a sense of, okay. But if you get complete, it's not quite right. You don't have to fight it. Changes in harmony with nature, you don't have to fight. Sometimes you have to put forth effort, and sometimes you have to overcome some mental challenges, but behind all of that there's a sense of enthusiasm for it, a sense of wellness, a sense of well-being, and we call that the direction of ease, that is always right and always brings a sense of peace and well-being, even if it's hard. So getting through medical school was really, really hard, but there's a sense of peace behind it, even though it's hard. You know, because you're going in the direction that nature has intended for you. Traveling to this retreat might have been a little hard, but there was a sense of enthusiasm or excitement or something that brought enough sense of peace and well-being to accomplish the task. If you don't have at least that little thread, you have to wait. In the waiting, we don't know. It could be a day. Sometimes the next morning it's there. Because something's getting changed in your psyche, something's getting changed in your physiology, just the thought of it, because it all starts in the thought. So as soon as you think to eat bitter, you've made a subtle change in the subtle body that now is going to permeate to the astral body, that's now going to permeate to the physical body. Just the thought. And sometimes it's a little easier if that thought carries for a day or two, then you check in again and now it's all set up, because the whole potency in the subtle body has generated a momentum into the astral body, and the physiology has started to change just enough that now it can manifest in the physical world. So it always goes from subtle to gross, and then gross to subtle. But it starts with everything starts with the thought. Everything, the entire creation was a thought, is a thought that creates a permeation in the prana that then creates the multiplicity and the various densities and the various interplays and the polarities. All of that came out of one thought. So you start with the thought and then check out the thought. In the physical, is there a direction of ease? If not, then we just wait, because that thought has already started a process. So there'll be a time in the future when we have more mental powers that you'll be able to think bitter and change your physiology. Really, that's available to you now. It's a little harder in the yuga that we're in right now, but it is available. Maybe not so practical, but there will be a time in the future that the prescription can be written, just written will be enough, or just the thought of it will change and it does, it changes your whole physiology anyways. But in this incarnate form, it's sometimes not potent enough, so now you've got to add the herb or the food. Start with the thought and then see when the space opens, when the direction opens, when the momentum's there, because that's changing the physiology from subtle to gross, and it'll be easier. Subtle to gross.